All right, so this is a representation of the very first presentation we made. It wasn't made on film, so we're just representing it here, so we have it on record. So I'm going to be talking about Crash Bandicoot, what made it so good, why was it so important that it deserved a re-release trilogy, the Insane Trilogy, which came out I think this year, right? Yes. And so I'm going to talk about why it's important from mainly a game design perspective and why it should be cared. All right. So next slide. All right. So this is the year 1996. All right. So Super Mario 64 comes out and basically reinvents what a 3D platformer should look like. There are a couple other 3D platformers that came before, like Bubsy. They're all bad. Super Mario 64 set the groundwork. A controllable camera, vast open worlds. But Super Mario 64 wasn't the only big, huge 3D platformer that came out in '96. So, next slide. This was Crash Bandicoot, which presumably was its main competitor. But the big thing you'll notice from just these random shots I've shown of Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot is that Crash Bandicoot just looks a lot better. And this is my first big argument as to why Crash Bandicoot was so impactful when it came out in '96. All right. Fundamentally, the game was just gorgeous compared to its competitors. In fact, when they first showed it off in at E3 trailers and at conferences, people just assumed that Naughty Dog, which was like 20 people, were cheating. They were lying. They had CPUs in a back room somewhere actually running everything. And it was so impressive that Sony's first-party in-house development team, which was also working on a 3D platformer, they canceled the project because they were so blown away by this graphics. Now, today it doesn't look that good, but back then in '96, this was incredible. And there were a lot of really, really cool techniques that they used to make this happen. Next slide. So besides like reinventing and like rewriting like the software that was used for PlayStation, they used a lot of really cool technical techniques. So like, can you play the video? No, go back. Yeah, just click on it. Yeah, all right, that should do it. So this is a strategy called culling, where basically to save polygon counts on the screen, they structured the environment in such a way so like objects could block out other things. So not only did this make environments so cluttered and beautiful with so many different objects, but they had a reason to put even more objects in there to hide the other stuff. So these levels became intricately like complicated set pieces, and it got to the point where if you go to the original Crash Bandicoot, like the actual disc has only 4 unused bytes on that whole disc, which is ridiculous. They managed to cram that much into one disc. I think they even strategically located bytes on like the inner, like I think the outer circle because it would spin faster. All kinds of crazy tricks they basically used. So my first argument that Crash Bandicoot was an utter technological like masterpiece for its time. So that was the first reason why it was such a big deal. All right. Next slide. All right. So the second big deal, the second reason why I think it's important is the conciseness of the game design and the precision in how it was controlled. So if you look at Crash, he's made of triangles, right? Clearly very sharp, very, he jumps out and it's a very simple design. And a simple character deserves very simple controls. You only really used 2 buttons in the first game, and the third second game added a third button, and that's pretty much all you control Crash with. And you used, of course, the directional stick or the directional buttons to move them. So, but the main thing about the controls was that they weren't sluggish, they weren't slow, there was no momentum. It was all about sharp, precise, immediate feedback to the player. And this conciseness was most evident, in my opinion, not just in Crash's character design, which is literally made of triangles, or in the gameplay, but also in the level design. So next slide. So if you notice, all these different levels, which all look very different, these are all like straight lines, right? So unlike Super Mario 64 was all about exploring a relatively ugly and graphically inconsistent area, this is about like the programmer could set up exactly what they wanted the player to see. And more importantly, there was a very simple and singular goal you had to achieve, which was to get to the end. And as you can see in each of these levels, it's very obvious what you have to do. There was a very concise and directed goal, and it was communicated very well. So obviously, you just go forward, keep going. All right. I think another good example is the use of camera. So this is a big deal when we enter the third dimension. So next slide. So what do we do with the camera, right? Super Mario 64 said, let's just have the player control it. And Crash Bandicoot's approach is, let's have the programmers control it and then use the camera to guide the player on the adventure we want them to have. And that is no more obvious than than in the backwards levels where you're getting chased by something. So in the first game it was these boulders, second game it was a polar bear, third game it was a Tyrannosaurus. Well, no, I think that's I forget what dinosaur that is, but it's a dinosaur. So you're basically being chased as you're running into the screen, and these were also really interesting levels for the time because people hadn't really seen stuff like this. So this is a great example of how when the player had control of the character, this stuff could never happen. But if you give the programmers and the designers control of the character, you can do a lot of control the camera. You can do a lot of really fun stuff. All right, next. All right, so the final reason I think Crash really stuck out with people was that it was really weird for the time period, right? Like Mario, I mean, it's kind of obvious what he is. It's an Italian man. But Crash Bandicoot was a bit strange, right? I mean, he's a bandicoot, which I don't even think many people even know is like a real animal. It's from Australia. This is the villain, Dr. Neocortex. He's just ridiculous. He's basically a joke character. And Crash's main attack is a spin attack, which just doesn't make any logical sense. So the game basically just is very irreverent with how it treats its story. And that is also expressed in the actual design. So next slide. So the secrets in these games were ridiculous, and they encourage exploration in a game that was relatively linear. For example, death platforms where you have to go through a level without dying, or colored gems, which if you look right there in Snowgo, the second level of the second game, getting that red gem, has nothing to do with jumping up there. It's a whole crazy path to doing it. And then red gems unlocked all these other paths. And that's not to mention secret entrances and secret exits, entire hidden levels and games where you have to hit a specific road sign or talk to it do a very arbitrary activity. It's all stuff that's hinted to you in the gameplay, but it requires a lot of exploration and thinking outside the box. So these games are also very, very crazy. So I think those are the three big reasons why they stuck out with players, why people were able to develop such nostalgia for them. All right, next slide. So then, of course, the games came out today, and as you can see, there are a lot of people who compared it to Dark Souls because the games are very hard. And I will say that this is actually one big weakness. I think the main weakness in the older Crash games is that the way they're made, especially the first game, it wasn't really made well in terms of difficulty. You had to literally earn the right to save. So if you didn't use the password system, or it was really difficult to save, and you could lose your progress if you turn your console off. But I think this is also a result of a nostalgia effect, where you imagine a game like this, and when you come back to play it, it's completely different, even though it's actually trying to be genuinely honest to the source material. So I think this is just an effect of people not really remembering what made the Crash games good. They thought of it as a fun platformer like Super Mario, when in reality it was a completely different kind of beast. And final slide. So I think the main reason why people were able to latch on to Crash Bandicoot were those three reasons. Number one is a technological marvel for its time period. Number two is very concise, focused gameplay that people could very easily get behind. And number three, it was weird, wacky, perfect for a young child to really fall in love with. And I can see why they remastered it. And I will have to say, the remaster did a pretty good job of capturing most of those elements. I think they captured they could capture the wackiness perfectly, but I think they missed the mark when they captured the conciseness in terms of I don't like the controls. I don't think they're as sharp as they were back then, especially with the way they redid some of the hitboxes and made it more realistic. And of course, the Insane Trilogy has been released in an era where things are beautiful. We have virtual reality that looks like real life. So there's no way the Insane Trilogy could have captured the beauty of the old Crash games. So the Insane Trilogy could never have fulfilled those three things that made the old Crash games so impressive. So of course the Insane Trilogy might have disappointed some fans. But I just think that's an example of how things definitely have an era of where they belong in. And my final point is that the Crash games weren't revolutionary. I don't think they did anything particularly new or that interesting, to be honest, right? But the reason they were so successful, all three of the games are top 10 best-selling PlayStation games, was that whatever they did it well. These games are polished, and they were made with a great deal of fidelity, love, and a great deal of competence. So, at the end of the day, the Crash games prove you don't have to be a revolutionary game. You just have to hit all your marks very well to be a good video game. So, thank you. You guys have any questions, real quick? Alright, so since this is a re-presentation, if you guys don't have any questions, it's fine, but we can still talk about it.
So can I see it a third time?
No.
Was Crash actually the first game that used the spin attack?
I don't think so. Well, see, okay, so then what do you have to say about Crash Spin Attack? I'm absolutely sure that's not the case. Like, I'm sure it's probably some. But the first Spin Attack probably came in like a plain game. Let's be honest. Like
Oh no, I mean
for a platformer.
No, a spin in this direction.
Yeah,
Well,
tornado.
like Sonic is like in like what?
I don't know. Maybe that could be the case. See, are you referencing the Super Mario Galaxy, which also has a Spin Attack?
Well, no. I was thinking.
Because I will say, like, I just want to add a quick aside about Super Mario Galaxy, which I think is, like, I love the Crash games. I'm so into them. They're like I'm very into them, right? But even then, I will say, objectively, Super Mario Galaxy, I think, is just a better game. Obviously, because it was released later.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this Crash games and Super Mario Galaxy games are in the same vein of like gameplay philosophy. They're both like linear. It's a great example of taking like this philosophy of like beauty and spectacle, of weirdness and wackiness, and of concise linearity, and applying it to the Mario world, right? Because that's why Super Mario Galaxy was so impressive. It wasn't a big open world. You were going down one path, but it still could give you the wonder that Crash captured through graphics, and Super Mario Galaxy captured through its like weird aesthetics. Wait, yeah, sorry. I guess I can't.
No, yeah, because like you brought that up in mentioning his personality.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, and you said like it was the first time you see this wacky spin animation. Like
It's so silly, yeah. Like with Mario, his thing is kind of. I mean, a jump doesn't really make sense, but at least it's a real thing a human can do, right? And so Sega introduced Sonic, right? So Sony's logic was like we needed our own platforming mascot, right? And they came up with all kinds of crazy stuff. So many people try to be the platforming mascot. I think the only ones Croc tried, Croc failed in my opinion. Although that's a controversial. Like if you're like a '90s kid, that's a very controversial thing to say.
like the shoes, crop.
No, it's just look it up. It's okay. I'm sure if someone watches it, they'll probably get it. I think the closest thing to Crash was probably Spyro the Dragon, which is another excellent trilogy. They're totally remaking that, by the way.
Also,
I'm gonna get it.
didn't Naughty Dog make that too?
No, Insomniac made that.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah, Insomniac and Naughty Dog are like best friend companies, though. I think they literally share the same street or something. Because there are a bunch of shoutouts in each other's games.
Right.
The
Yeah.
art style's kind of similar.
Yeah.
With the eyes especially.
Yeah, they are similar because Insomniac also did like Insomniac. So I showed like here, Matt. Here, let me actually control the slides. I want to show you something. So something you notice, right? So you look at the first game, right? So if you look at the first game, which is I'll just say an example of it, right? Okay, top left, right? You can see that area is very cramped, right? Because you can't really show. So each of these games were made in 1 year, which is just ridiculous in my opinion. But within 2 years, these guys have got such mastery that they were able to do something like the medieval levels, which I'm going to show you a picture of. Yeah, top right? Do you see that expansive background that they have there? That's in a trilogy, I guess. Let me see if I can find another example here. Yeah, like the future level in the bottom left, right? They were able to graduate beyond the idea of using I don't think they used culling in the third Crash game. I think they had found a way to actually show an expansive background without the need to hide it behind objects, right? I'm pretty sure they did all sorts of tricks like converting, like for example, if you break the camera in these future levels, you'll realize like some of these aren't even 3D objects, some of them are just sprites, but the way they are placed, it looks so cool. So as Naughty Dog got better and better at breaking the Sony engine, right? They use all these tricks. The other games, literally, the developer just didn't know how to do. I think that the guy who came up with this programming way, Andy Gaffney, is from MIT. He basically invented his own language. It was pretty crazy. And I think Insomniac used similar tricks to create the expansive landscapes in Spyro, because that stuff like there were games on the PS1 from the same era that looked really terrible, right? And like Super Mario 64 pretty much pushed the N64 to the Ocarina of Time, but any Ocarina of Time area looks really bad compared to Crash. Like this looks like, in my opinion, like the idea that this came out in the same year as the N64 Super Mario 64 games, it's pretty astonishing, and I can see that's why the PlayStation ended up doing so well, because it just had better graphical capabilities, and I think it just looked really cool back in the day. Right. Any more questions? Or I guess that wraps it up. Cool. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. You guys have got to learn about Crash Bandicoot.